what I've got given you here is a couple of examples of what that report might look like. So this is a top-level report that, as you can see, it's on the left and the list on the bottom. So the group by project. In this case, there's one project listed by iteration, and then all the the count of how many work items there are in each of those different priority buckets. I actually threw a column in here that shows how old they are, so I did a little bit of extra calculation there, doing some mathematical calculation on the age to see how many days old these work items are. Once we're there, if we click on that count, we should get a list report similar to this. So looking at things like, so again, showing the project name, in this case, the type of work item it is, its state, an ID for that, and then things like what the name are, how many people subscribe to some planned work, actual work, some extra columns. You know, I may not go through and create all these columns, but we should wind up with a report that looks very similar. With that being said, I'm going to go and now kind of walk you through that process, how to create the list report that includes the drill through to a sub-report. You'll learn how to create the drill through target report that accepts the parameters and displays basically a filtered set of data that is dependent on the link that you clicked from or that you used to click to it. And finally, how to create a hyperlink in that report that launches a CLM application. So let me go ahead and switch over and bring up my browser so we can kind of look and watch this whole process. If anyone has any questions along the way, feel free to kind of speak out. I'm going to go ahead and expand the chat window. Let me expand those out. The chat and question with us. You can either raise your hand or ask a question in the question window, or a chat in the chat window. Before I go too far, are there people on the call? Is everyone on the call familiar, or is anybody not familiar with any of the Cognos tools, Cognos Report Studio, that comes with Rational Reporting for Development Intelligence or Insight? Is there anybody who hasn't had any exposure to those, or is everybody on there? So why don't you kind of raise your hand if you've had no exposure to the Cognos reporting tools. Very good, Wayne. So this will be good for you, Wayne. This will be a quick primer into how the reporting tools work. So I'm going to assume, I know David has these on my calls before, and I think Brian as well. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining deep details into Cognos, but you'll get the feel of it as we go along, Wayne, to understand how it works and how we create the reports. So like I said, we need two reports. We need a high-level report, and we need a lower-level report. And then, David, you asked about DCC. Let me unmute you. Is there some specific question about DCC?
No, I just noticed that. I noticed that you have it on your screen, and I've actually just recently installed it.
We can dive into that at the end.
Okay.
So this is a leftover from my earlier webcast I did at 11 o'clock. So if we want, we can kind of talk about DCC at the end if you've got some questions. All right, so let me go and first, I'll bring up this window over here. This shows the actual running report so we can see some of the interaction with it. So in this report, it has a filter up top on the project and the request type. Request type I could filter by defect, and now I should see my report. The list of work items in there shrink down because now it's only looking at defects. I actually added a chart to this as well, just to kind of show how that interaction would work too. And then, like I said, if I click on one of these columns, the requirement said I should be able to get a list of those. So now if I click on this, I should see the high priority defects, because I'm filtered by defects, that are assigned to iteration 2 in the JKE banking project. And sure enough, there they are. There's my 5 defects with a defect ID, and then these are hyperlinks that go off, and we'll display that particular defect within, in this case, it's the change management application. All right, so from that, I'm just going to go ahead and let me go off here and go ahead and launch my Report Studio application, and we'll go ahead and start and build this thing from scratch. It's actually probably opening up that one I had, so I'm going to create a new report here as soon as it comes to life. So I'm going to, the top level report was a simple list report, so I'll start with that. So now when you, and for Wayne, when you first bring up the Cognos Report Studio UI, the tool, this is kind of the palette you get. I selected a list, so I used to have this little list control in the middle of the screen. On the left is sort of my data model that I can select objects to display on this particular list. And so I know in this case, because I've done this before, and I'll kind of talk toward the end about how this data model is organized, but because I'm doing a change request, all the work items from RTC are mapped into this change request object. I know I wanted to look at work items or change requests. And when I looked at them, there were a few things I wanted to have. I wanted to have a project name. So I wanted to be grouped by what project the change requests were. And so if we look at all these selections, this is also the attributes of a change request or a work item that I can select when adding it to a report. So I'll just double click on project name, and now the project name of a work item will be displayed. I'm going to go and display a couple of other things. Let me look here. Let me go back to my main one. We want to have project name, we want to have the iteration and the priority. So let me kind of look for the iteration name. And there it is. Double click, it winds up in my table as well. And then the request priority. So here's my request priority, and that will show up. And then I wanted to have I'm just going to use the count. So how many of these work items there are, I want to count up how many of them there are. So to do that, I'm really just going to put the ID of the work item request in my table, and under one of the aggregate on the properties on it, I'm going to tell it as it kind of rolls this up and displays it grouped by some other attributes. I want to tell it to go ahead and count them out. So I want to count how many of them are. So there's an aggregation rule here called count. So essentially, it's going to count how many requests there are at each of the different roll-ups. In this case, I'm going to roll it up to priority, and then iteration and project name. Now, like I said, we wanted to kind of group it by these different attributes. So the first is project name, and there's a little icon up here called group and ungroup, which will let me, the report will automatically create a grouping and group all the similar objects, the similar project names together. So I'll click that and get this little group icon in my column. I can do the same with iteration name, and then within a project like JKey Banking, all of the iterations will be grouped together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then finally, I'm going to group my priorities. So each of the priorities will be grouped together under iteration name. So what this will essentially do is now, because I put a count aggregate function on my request ID, it will count up those requests and show me a count next to the priority, so how many there are at each of those priorities. And they'll all be grouped together by iterations and by project. So I'm going to go ahead just real quickly now that I've got this. If I do a quick run on this, it should show them to me for my entire database. I haven't put any qualifiers on it. So it should show me a count at all my different work item types at each of the priorities. So if I can click a quick button here to do a run, what I see is for the JKE Banking, I see a lot of different, for all the different releases, how many high, medium, and low work items there are, and I can page down and keep going through. Okay, so that kind of is a nice basic overview. In the case of, and David, you said how to handle duplicates. There really aren't duplicates in CLM of the work items. Each work item ID, each request ID is actually unique there. So that's really not an issue. I can go into that a little bit because the request ID I chose is the unique request ID in the data warehouse of each of these work items. Okay, so let's make sure, okay, so here's my basic work item list. The next thing I want to do is I said I wanted to just look at open work items. So to do that, I'm going to add one more attribute on this and filter it. So I'm going to go ahead and add the work item state. Actually, it's the status, so the request status field. I'll put it right next to priority. And for this, I'm going to add a filter. So I only want to look at open work items. And to do that, there's a nice little filter button here. And I'll click on creating a filter, and it's going to create a filter for me that will only look at open work items. The filtering works the same on any of the different kind of, if you will, enumeration-based attributes. So if I could do it on status, I could do it on state. I could do it on what the category is. I could do it on iteration. Any of those, I could create a nice little filter there. If I look at it now, I should see just the open work items, again, bundled by or grouped by priority. So they are now, all I'm seeing is open for each of my different projects, right? And I see the count there, how many of them there are. So the last thing I think we wanted to do on this particular part of it was I said we wanted to add a couple of prompts or filters so I can dynamically choose what project and which, and that's a great question, Wayne, so can it be selectable? So we're going to, right now, add a couple of filters here that are selectable. So we can select the request type, and we can select the project name. So to do that, let's see, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add, I like putting little filters in a block at the beginning of my report, because then my little selection, my filters don't wind up in my report, and it's an easy way of separating them. So to do that, I'm going to add a couple of prompts. So you asked if we can select them. So I'll add first a value prompt that I'm going to use for my project name. And it asks for a parameter. So this parameter is key, because I'm going to use this in a couple places. One is it's a parameter that gets set that controls what you see on the list report. And the second is it can get passed down to our drill through report. So I'm going to call it PD project for the project prompt parameter. Next, and it's going to ask me for, if I'm going to create as a parameter to another report, what item is it? So I'm going to choose that same area, again, going down to request, and put project, select project name. I'll make it optional so we don't have to specify it. It'll show them all if we don't specify it, and if we do, it'll go ahead and use that selection. Next, it's going to create a new query for that. That's fine. And there we go. So now I have a little prompt here, right? And it's using this query to get the list of them, and it puts it's using the project name attribute and sets the parameter P project. The one thing I want to set on here is auto submit. So when I change it, it automatically reruns the report. Now, if I go and look at this particular, the query behind this, and I'll go to those in just a minute, I'm going to test it right now and see if it indeed does change that project name, and then we'll look where that filter was put in that particular report. So if I run it again, and as you can see, it's kind of the workflow I follow usually is I'll make some changes to a report, I'll run it and test it, and then go back and make some more changes to it. So now here's all the projects. If I select one of them, lo and behold, my list is now filtered by the project name. So that should have answered your question, Wayne, about making that selectable. I could have made the status selectable as well. But in this case, I just made the project name selectable. So I think that's pretty good for that one. Let me close this and go back. The other thing I may want to do is add like a text item, so that's a label before that. So I often put those like kind of right before it, and type in a label for that project name. So we know what that prompt is for. So that's great. Now this particular report has a project name, an iteration name, a priority, right? And it's got a count of number of requests, not in a particular status. So what I wanted, so now that we have a kind of a basic skeletal high-level upper report built, the next thing we want to do is figure out, we want to kind of create a second report with some details about that set of work items. So if I click on that number, I want to go run a second report and show me those 5 or 10 or 1 or 2, however many work items there were that were in that particular at that status at that priority level. So let me, before I lose this, let me first save this, my first upper level report, and I will call this so that's my main report I would run. The next thing I want to do is pretty simple. I want to create a sub-report that just basically lists out a few more details of this particular work item. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go in and create one more new report. It's going to be a list report as well, and it will list a couple of additional fields, more details about those work items. And as I said earlier, give you the option of now drilling through from that report into RTC. So now I've got sort of just a skeletal outer report. From this, I want to add a few things, and I said, like we had seen before, we want to make sure that we can filter it and look for only the work items of a particular project. So I'm going to, again, put the project name in here, the project name. I'm going to put the iteration name and the severity. Right, because those were the 3 basic things we were counting. And we also looked at the status of it. So we looked at what the request status was. And actually, yeah, we can put that here. And now, once we have those fields, what do we want to see? I think I want to see a few things. Let's see what the individual request ID is. That's under, I think it's under resource ID. Maybe the name of the request. Maybe who the owner is. O for owner. And possibly let's look maybe at the create date, when it was actually created, so we can look how old this thing is. So we'll look at the creation date. So here's all these different things, these different fields. Now what we want to do, the next thing we want to do is, and you're right, I think somebody said it was priority and not severity, wasn't it? I can check real quick, hold on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're correct. And my drill through report didn't have it, but this one did. It was priority, yes, you're correct. So real simple to fix. Let me just get rid of that column and put request priority in there. I'm glad someone was watching. Now, yeah, thanks, David. Next thing I want to do is make sure that as it runs this, it actually filters that on the parameters I'm going to pass it. So that's how we link in the master or the drill through subject and the drill through target, if you will. So I'm going to now go through and look at the actual query behind this. And I want to set a couple of parameters here. So first I want to set a filter, so I only want to see work items that belong to a certain project, and I'm going to make it equal, and this is the convention you use for specifying a parameter is question marks around it. Right? And so now it will automatically create a parameter in the report called pproject, and I'll see that when I try to link it up. I'm going to do the same for iteration. I didn't need to double click. I'll drag it across. Iteration name. the iteration, and request priority. We'll put it up here with the others. And last, we'll do status, just because it's we filtered on it. And for completeness, I'll include that one as well. And for each of these, I want to be able to run this report without specifying them, or if I can either have them required or optional. I'm going to make these optional, so if I were to run this report, I don't have to specify all of those parameters. All right, and now I have my basic report. I'm going to go ahead and save this off, and I'll call this my work items by priority drill through, or details. How's that? I'm going to add one more thing to this query here. We talked about being able to drill through to the actual data source RTC. To do that, I need to have this URL field. The URL is actually, like I said, the URL, the href, if you will, to actually launch that particular work item. And we're going to connect these together, and then the last thing I'll do is I'll come back and show you how to create that hyperlink. So here we go. I saved my drill through report. And now the next thing I want to do, I'm going to go back to my main report and connect those two together. So I've got my sub-report that has the details and my outer report that's sort of a summary. What I want to do is on the request ID, when I have a count of them, I want to click on one of those counts and be able to bring up my sub-report. So to do that, there's a drill-through definition, which is how you define what that drill-through behavior is going to be. And there you specify when you drill through, when you click on that, what report it's going to run. And like we have our details report, we'll run that one. The actions you can specify to run it, you can specify to view the most recent report, a number of things, options on there. We'll just use the default option, and we'll also the default format. So other formats could include HTML, PDF, XML, Excel, or delimited file. I'm going to go ahead and open a new window so it doesn't clobber the window I'm in. And then here's the kind of the magic that connects those two together. There's a little pencil here that lets me go ahead and create some parameters on it. What that does essentially is parses through that target report and looks at the parameters in there. It gives me an option of specifying those and how I want to pass data from my master report to my sub-report. So in this case, there's four parameters which we had just created, and I want to pass kind of data item values from the row I'm looking at to this particular, from the master report to the drill-through report. And then I can specify what data item value from my query. So for the iteration, I'll pass to the iteration name of the row I'm clicking on. The priority, I'll click on the request priority, I'll select the request priority, the project name, and then finally the request status. So all of those will go in, and that way the sub-report will filter it the same way the master report did. And then we should be good. That's really all there is to connecting a master report to a child report. And let's go ahead, I'm going to save that, and we'll test that out. We'll give it a quick run here. So here's my master report. I'm going to go ahead and filter it by, again, my change management project. And now I can see all of for each of my sprints, how many open requests there are. So I'm going to go ahead and say click on this 12 here. It should now launch and run that detail report and show me just those 12 open high priority sprint to JKE banking change management work items. And so lo and behold, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There they are. So there's all of the work items that made up that count. And now I can see the name, who owns that, and when it was created. So there's just some details and some options that I put in there. If I don't want, or I can group them once again, if we want, we can group this report by project name, by iteration name, by priority, just like we did the other one, so we don't have them repeated over and over again. that's essentially what that grouping does. One of the nice features is it does make it so every row doesn't repeat duplicate data if it can group them and sum them up together. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I now know all of these particular, some more details about these work items. But let's say at this point I really want to go and see, there's not enough here. I want to see the history. I want to see some more information about this. Maybe if it's blocking or who the parent and children are of this. So let's go ahead and then do that final step in this report, in the child report, of adding that hyperlink to drill through from the detail report into RTC. And to do that, I'm going to essentially kind of hijack the reference ID field. Right? So I'm going to use that ID as my link. I can use the ID or the name. In fact, I think I'll use the name because it's a little bit longer and easier to use and easier to read. So there's over here on the left, and this is Wayne, you haven't seen this interface much. So on the left here, we've got the kind of the data explorer here that looks at your data model. There's also a toolbox which lets me drag and drop kind of different objects onto my report. In this case, I actually want to put a hyperlink in to be able to link, create a hyperlink. So when I click on it, it will go out and run, run a command to execute that hyperlink. So I'm going to go right next to the reference ID and put a hyperlink in. So for a hyperlink, we have a couple of things we can specify. One is, what text am I going to display in this column? And the second is, where am I going to get the URL for that? So in this case, it's not really text. I'm going to use a data item value for that. And I'm going to actually use the name because I kind of think I like the long name. So now the name of the work item will be a hyperlink. When I click on it, it'll do something. And then the URL over on the left, what's it going to do? Again, the URL, I'm going to use a data item value. And I'm going to use that handy little URL data item that I threw in here that I haven't used yet. And so now when you click on that row, it should go in and link out and run or bring up the run the URL or execute that URL. Now the last thing I want to kind of do here is I want to go two more things. The column header now says hyperlink, which isn't kind of user friendly. I'm going to put work item name. We'll put headline because it's really the headline up in RTC. And then we have essentially two name columns in there. We don't really need them side by side. So the first name column, I'm just going to cut out. An important note, if I were to go in and delete it, it's going to delete name from the query, but I need that for my hyperlink. So I'm going to cut it, which cuts it from the table but leaves it in the query. Kind of a handy little trick. And then, like we said, I think I want to kind of group these things like on the other report. So I'm going to group by project name, group by iteration, group by priority, and group by status. So they all show up kind of only once, and we see my nice little, my ID, the name, my owner name, and my creation date. That should be all there is. Let me check one more thing. I think the one other thing is there's a, only because I ran into it earlier, there's a properties flag. Because I'm not using the URL anywhere in my report, it needs to know that I do want to access the URL and the name fields. Even though they're not specifically mentioned in my list, I do need to tell Cognos or tell the report engine that go ahead and fetch those for me because I need them when I go in and I execute my hyperlink. Saving that, and then my one last time, I'm going to open my original report. Beautiful, and if I run it this time, there we go. So again, I'm going to look at my project. I will look at just JKE banking. Sprint 2, medium. Let's look at a different grouping now. We'll look at this one up here that had under product backlog there were 4, so we can ensure that we're definitely seeing a different list. And lo and behold, there are just 4 of them displayed. And now we can see there's hyperlinks under the headlines. And if I click on one of these, let's look at integrate graphical reports. It's going to open in line RTC, and let's make sure it's looking at integrate graphical report. So if they take that URL and launch through launch that URL in the current web browser. And let me and David, you wanted to explain which point again? Checking you. Oh, okay, gotcha. I know what you wanted. So the point I had made was when I put a hyperlink in my report, and in that hyperlink I referenced a couple of fields from my query. Well, the engine behind that's running that query tries to optimize as much as it can, and it's saying it goes and looks at the data items that I'm using in my current object, my list report. And it says in this case I'm using project name, iteration name, priority status, and the request ID. If there's some other objects in there, like we had the name and the URL that were back in the query but not referenced or utilized in my report object in my list view, the optimization within the report engine won't fetch those from the database. So to get around that, there's a property you can set on a particular object that says when I run this particular list, there's some properties on it, and that the properties tell it some extra fields to make sure you fetch. So this essentially says, and if we look down at the bottom, specifies a list of data items from the query in scope to associate with the selected object. This is necessary when you want to reference a data item that is not associated in the query but not used in the layout. So that's just, as I said, it tries to optimize those things away. The property down here, and the property chain is actually called properties. So I click on properties, it's the properties property. Kind of a strange name for it, but it is what it is. Okay, so that I think pretty much satisfied the requirements of creating a master report that counted up the request IDs in a particular status by priority. It let me put a filter on it, a prompt that lets me enter it a project name, and it goes ahead and filters this high-level report, showing me only the request in that for a particular project. It then also drills through into a sub-report that has more detail, and the sub-report can do a drill through into yet again a more detailed report, showing me or drills through into the data source that contains that object. In this case, was RTC. The actual tool that particular work item is associated with. The one last thing I will kind of quickly go through and show you, just because, and I think I showed it to you last month, but I'll show it once again because it's kind of good to kind of reiterate how it's done. I now have my outer report and my inner report. Let's say I want to now take and add that report to my RTC dashboard. So let's do that really quickly. Here's a work item list. That's international reporting. Let's go back to, here's my defect. So I'm going to, in this case, now I've got my little master and child drill down report. Let's say now I want to go ahead and add that to my JKE banking change management dashboard. Down here I have an RRDI tab, and I'm going to make it easy because I did this earlier, I'm going to go ahead and delete that particular report. And now I'm going to add a widget. What we saw last week was we had added what was called a report widget. The report widget lets us kind of interact with that report. So I'm going to search for it down here and add that widget, and then I can close this. On the bottom, actually, let me hold off because I missed one step. In order to add a report to this widget, it has to be, we have to actually import it from the Cognos server, from RRDI or Insight, and you do that using the report resources. So again, Wayne, you may have used RTC, so this is now kind of standard RTC thing work when you kind of play with report resources to import one from a predefined report, or in this case, a RRDI report. I'll go ahead and create my resource to import it from my custom report server. In this case, I'll call it my RRDI. micro work item by priority. The micro is needed, as I explained in my last session. If it has micro, it'll be visible to that report widget. Otherwise, it'll just be visible to a standard custom report widget, and it's visible in the report perspective, but not within that nice little report widget I'm going to use. Now I'm going to go look, and here's that work items by priority main report. I'm going to select, and that's the one I want to import in. So once I save it, it should have saved my report resource. And now when I go and look at my dashboard, CCM, change management, click here. Now I can go through under project. It'll show what project I want to use. That's really not utilized in the RRDI reports, but it's used for some of the other reports custom reports that you could put in. The next thing I want to use my RRDI micro work item by priority. That's the report we just imported, and go ahead and say okay. Now at that point, as you go through and run this report, and lo and behold, there's my master report, project name with all my hyperlinks. If I go through and drill down, now I'll just drill down without even specifying a project, and it should still, because I'm in the row that has this project in it. In fact, I'll go through, yeah, I'm going to go through on this one. And it ran my sub-report, and again, from here, if I want to go click on one of these, it goes and it views that report within RTC. So that's that about wraps up what I had to present on this topic. I see, David, you got, no, Wayne, you got another question. Do you need Cognos to make the custom report, or is it generated from the custom report? So in this case, to import a resource from a custom report, so I went back to report resources. This particular button, create resource from custom report, custom reports, in what they're referring to strictly a RRDI or rational insight or Cognos-based report that is built using the Cognos report server that's connected to the CLM instance. Cognos report server comes automatically. It's just part of RRDI and rational insight. So I did all the authoring of the report within RRDI and testing it up in the Cognos instance in RRDI. I then imported that report as a resource into my CLM application, in this case into my RTC application, and once it's imported as a report resource, I could then access it on my dashboard. At this point, I don't need to log into Cognos anymore to run it, but every time I go and open up that dashboard, it is going to make a connection to my Cognos server to run that report. Because the Cognos is the engine behind it that actually runs that particular report. So I'll pause there, Wayne and David. You've been nice and interactive. I like that. And I know Jacqueline. I'm probably not pronouncing your name right, but maybe it's Jon. Jon, do you have any questions? Have you seen any of this before? And at this point, there's only 3 of us. And David, I'm going to open the phones up to you, and I'm going to Wayne as well. I've actually got all 3 of you. Yeah, David, I'm sure you have a series of questions. I've got all 3 of you non-muted. So Wayne, was this informative, interesting?
Yeah, definitely. My only concern is when we were talking about the Cognos was, oh, is that another tool, is another package, but if it's part of the RRDI, then that's fine. That was just what I wasn't clear on.
And Wayne, do you have RRDI installed in your site?
Yeah, it's basically trying to get installed at the minute. I mean, I wanted the whole intent is to do all the stuff you just did, but what I didn't want to find out is, oh, install it and now there's another piece I needed. So that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, I recognize your name. Did I?
Yeah,
I think I did. Did I work with you trying to get either RRDI or Insight installed at IDX?
Yes.
Okay. Are you using it all? And you're a little kind of fuzzy. I'm not sure if my voice is fuzzy as well. But the connection.
And yeah, we haven't got it installed yet, but we're working through that because the whole, I need to do the server, I need to get it installed correctly.
Okay, well, I'll probably send a note out to you after this, just kind of what I wanted to see if there's any assistance you need to kind of move forward. And I'm not sure, David, if your questions are all specifically related to, go ahead and shoot fire, and we'll.
Okay, then the first is, are you recording this?
I am recording the session, so I can. And once I stop, I will. I'll send out a link. It'll probably be posted up on Ironside Rational, and I'll send you guys a link to it.
Okay. I've worked through labs with RRDI before, and I have seen drill downs, but the way that you did this here was a lot more streamlined than how some of these labs work. So that was good. The other question I had was, is there a way to see the SQL that's generated behind the design?
Yeah, there is. Let me kind of go through that, show you that really quick. I don't. It can sometimes be a little overwhelming, but let's see if I can find it here. Let's look at one of my reports. Here's my work item list, open by priority. There's one of them. So if I go into this report, I'm going to go ahead and open this in Report Studio. Here's a report I created earlier, just playing around. It's a little bit different. If it would help, I could send out both the master and child reports to you guys if you want to look at them and play with them, if you want that, David.
Sure.
So if I look here, I think maybe under Tools, Show Generated SQL. So this here will show the SQL that's generated for each of the queries in my report.
Okay.
All right, so that was queries too. If I look at queue requests, yeah. So there are the raw SQL against the tables in the data warehouse. I can tell these VWs are views within our data warehouse.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because with JRS, which is the new reporting mechanism, it's limited in what it can do, but you can modify the SQL directly. So one of the things I was thinking about was using RRDI to drill down and get the data that I want, and then take the SQL and dump it into JRS. As a way of
understood. I know that Dan Gouveia on my team went down and he tried to do that right when he started playing with JRS. He didn't. The SQL that came out of Cognos didn't seem to run properly under JRS.
Yeah. So it was just, but also not necessarily to dump the SQL as is, but to identify what tables are getting hit, what parameters in those tables are getting hit. You know, I think the way JRS organizes the SQL is a little bit different.
Okay, understood.
There's one more question I had. I lost it. There was a question I had, and I kind of remember what it was.
If you remember, just send it to me offline.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to answer it.
Yeah, if you could send the reports and the link and all that, that would be great.
We'll do. Well, then I think I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you guys all for hanging in there and watching the webcast. I did record it, and I'll make a few slides from up front available as well. Well, someone, either myself or someone from our team, will kind of be in touch to see if there's anything we can do to help, and to kind of give you access to that as to the slideware and the recorded demo. That being said, keep an eye on IronsideRational.com and for a list of our upcoming webcasts. We have them in a number of different subjects, and I know I've got one queued up for next month. I may get the reporting folks from IBM to do a talk on the next version of RPE that's coming out. So RPE 2.0. I think it's 2.0. With that, thank you very much.